Welcome to G42 On Air. As AI and advanced technology scale at lightning speed, this podcast series brings us face to face with the change makers shaping our future. So take your front row seat with me, Amandeep, as we explore how these powerful new technologies are created, how they're transforming our world, and what's coming next. In today's episode, we focus on the intersection of AI and space tech. And to launch into this exciting topic, I'm joined here in the studio by Karim Sabbagh, Managing Director of Space42. Karim, welcome to our podcast. Now, you're the perfect guest to have in the hot seat, drawing on over 2 decades of experience in the space sector. Let's ask you to give us the context first of all. When we speak about AI and space tech, break that down for us.
Let's start with space. When you think about the industry, it's you could sort of peel it into 2 levels. The first level is effectively deploying assets in space or technologies in space. So what you and I get to see, the satellites that are orbiting Earth. And these satellites are orbiting Earth anywhere between 600 and 1,000 kilometers or at 8,000 kilometers. And some satellites are orbiting Earth at 36,000 kilometers. So that's the first layer of our technology in space as human. The other part of this space technology is deployed on Earth. So these are the ground segments that you see that allows us to communicate with these spacecrafts, control them, but also receive the product or the service from them, whether it's a picture, it's an image, it's an information, or literally it's a communication. So that's one part. The other part is what we're all sort of discovering in our daily lives is this cognitive capability, artificial intelligence, that allows us to improve productivity, whether we're looking for information at the most basic level, or we have now a better way of managing our assets in space. And our intent as Space42 is now to bring these 2 sort of universes together.
And you mentioned there Space42, a very exciting new merger. You were instrumental in that successful merger. It was a merger of Bayanat and Yasat. For our audience who are unfamiliar with those 2 entities, why was it so important to form this new entity?
You could think about the space industry as sort of the construct of 3 different domains. The first domain that you and I use in our everyday lives is communication. So assets or technology in space allows people on Earth to communicate. So I'm on one continent and I need to communicate with someone else on another continent. I send my signal to space and that signal goes back to the person I want to have a conversation with, or I need to share data with. This is, in fact, the genesis of the space industry. So the first satellite that was launched in 1963 is considered to be a communication satellite. The other part of the space industry is geospatial intelligence or geospatial analytics. So actually capturing information from space or images to inform decisions on Earth, whether this decision relates to knowing where the cars and the trucks are, knowing where the floods are unfolding, knowing whether my borders are secure or not. So literally informing decision-making. And the third part of the space industry is what we call or refer to as positioning. What you and I use in our daily lives whenever we use Google Maps to move from point A to point B, it's ultimately trying to refer to a signal or set of signals that are enabled largely through satellite technologies. What Space42 is doing is bringing 2 of these 3 domains together, which will be the first time in the history of our industry, is bringing geospatial capabilities through Bayanat and is bringing SATCOM capability through Yasat. And our thesis here is that at the intersection of these 3 domains, you have a convergence of technologies, you have a convergence of use cases, and when you add to this AI, you can start entertaining entirely new domain that we haven't thought of yet. And we're in the early innings of this journey.
And so, of course, by forming Space42, you've now created the UAE's first AI-powered space technology company with global reach. How unique is it this setting that this has happened here in the UAE?
The UAE for us is not just our home base, but it's a formidable sandbox. And what I'm referring to is sandbox. It's an environment that makes it possible for us to innovate, to discover new challenges. Sometimes we stumble, but it allows us to sort of create, test, learn, improve, perfect, and scale. And so our ambition in these two domains that we're now merging with AI is to take these capabilities that we're demonstrating in terms of having an impact on the societies and economies we're serving and be able to scale them at a global level. Because at the end of the day, the benefit of being in space is that the moment you have deployed your technologies at 600 kilometers or 1,000 or 8,000 or 36,000 is you by design have a reach that goes beyond the confines of your natural territory, whatever that definition is. In fact, I would simplify it for you. If you have satellites that are deployed at 36,000 kilometers, which is what Yasat has today, you already have visibility on 1/3 of visible Earth. So you could imagine now with this opportunity, with this potential, the question of achieving your potential of global reach is an opportunity that you absolutely have to seize. And that's pretty much where we are.
And so you started your answer there and use a very key word there. But the UAE is an area which allows you to stumble, test, almost use this area as a test bed. I mean, what is it that's so unique about the creative environment, the technological environment, the economic diversification that's happening here in this country?
Well, I think a fitting starting point would be to talk about the policy and the strategy or strategies of the UAE in these domains. So the UAE is one of the very few nations that has a very progressive strategy for space. So it's the Space Strategy 2030, combined with the AI Strategy 2031. And so we're starting from a platform where there is national encouragement, national enablement, whether it's from a funding standpoint, whether it's from a regulatory standpoint, whether it's from creating the optimal environment or the conducive environment for us to be able to do this. To be able now to not only think about the opportunities, but be able to tap into the necessary resources and talents in the UAE that allows us to prosecute this. Because at the end of the day, what we do could be arguably largely dependent on technology, could be largely dependent on capital, but also depends on talent. And how do you bring these two variables together? And obviously having the right policies that wraps around them. And so in my mind, the UAE is one of the few privileged environments around the world where you could sort of have confidence, right? But yet to be proven in our case, but at least the starting point for us to say, am I able to type into an environment that would sort of incentivize me, will enable me, will afford that we make our share of mistakes, learn from them, and go forward? And the answer is absolutely yes.
I think that's really exciting for you to emphasize that this is the environment for experimentation and also for future growth and progress. You hit on some key words there, talking about opportunity, talent, and resources. So with the combination of those key ingredients, and Space42 has been cooked up and has been delivered, what are you hoping to achieve?
I always refer to our success as, in terms of measurement, to be able to have the highest impact on the societies and the economies we want to serve. We are already present in 150 countries through the Yasat network that exists today. So that already gives us an entrée en scène to the other part of the business that we're bringing together. And so when you think about the highest impact, the way we measure it in our daily life is, am I being more productive? So when I use an AI tool in our daily lives, again, I'm not even talking about professionally, is because I can inform my decision making or I can enact an action much more efficiently than I could have done it through other means. And so at the end, if we truly fulfill our mission in terms of enabling communication through space to hundreds of countries around the world in the most efficient manner, and efficient could be because I actually can deliver a very good service and I can do this economically, in a way that economically is relevant, because you don't want to sort of come up with something that's not affordable. That for me is a good measurement of success. And same thing for geospatial intelligence. So when all is said and done, and when you want to sort of gauge the success of Space42, it's not just about succeeding in the UAE, which is absolutely important because this is our home base, but be able to take these capabilities and scale them globally. In fact, I was on a panel earlier today, and the moderator sort of gave us 30 seconds at the end and said, if you had to sort of make an educated forecast or informed forecast about the future in your domain, what would it be? And I told him, I think we will start to see an acceleration of UAE-centric technology companies that are now taking their capabilities globally. We've seen this in professional services. We've seen this in other domains, financial services. I think technology were in the early days, and because of the combination of traditional technologies and AI, in our case, space and AI, I think now we have the perfect path to sort of globalize our capabilities.
So you've spoken about some of the opportunities in scaling globally, and your reach is phenomenal. What are some of the challenges that you foresee?
I think the challenge for us is how quickly can we do it? I always say we don't want to sort of postpone for tomorrow what we could do today. One. Two, the other challenge is that in the space industry, unlike the AI industry, the development cycle of the technologies are very long. Some of them could be 15 years, others could be 5 years. AI models are changing every 6 months, right? And so how do you reconcile these two timelines and horizons so that you can make the best out of them? And if you do it right, and we're sort of certainly lining up our resources, our management attention, the commitment for our shareholders, G42 and Mubadala, we're lining up this so that we can sort of execute on the shortest critical path. And one good example would be to be able now to offer communication anywhere in the world on our daily digital devices, i.e. what you want to be able to offer is if you're somewhere where there's no terrestrial network. So let's say you're hiking somewhere in northern Quebec, which is where my second home is. My first home is in Abu Dhabi. My second home is in Quebec, in Canada. I live in an area that doesn't have coverage. And let's say that I want to communicate with someone who is within an area of coverage or is not. Today, it's not possible to use satellite communication using normal devices. 3 years from now, we, Space42, we want to be part of a global network that can do that. And what you would have done, go back to our early goal, is globalize one of our core capabilities. We have a business today, which we refer to as mobile satellite solutions, the Thuraya business, where if you have bespoke satellite phones, you can communicate. But that's a bespoke satellite phone. And so we move from serving a community of hundreds of thousands of potential users to all the billions of users that have normal iOS or Android devices. And suddenly what you have done is you have fulfilled your core mission. How do you scale up and how do you have the highest impact on societies and economic scale? So that's for me is one of many examples of the ambitions of Space42.
I think as you describe your core mission there, it really speaks to the audience. You've made something which otherwise might feel quite ethereal, AI and space tech, applicable to people's everyday lives. And that feels like it's a message and a mission that's core to Space42.
Correct. Either it's theoretical, but I would say it's largely quite finite. So we're able to deliver this, but we're delivering this only to a finite number of end users, either because the deployment model is too demanding, or is because even if you figure out a way to deploy this efficiently, the cost of delivering the service is still quite onerous. And what you want to be able now to do is how do I remove these entry barriers? So go back to the direct-to-device. I have eliminated the entry barriers by deleting the need to have a bespoke device. Plus, if I have now a network that makes the best use of space technology that fuse with AI, I can deliver the service at a fraction of the cost of the traditional mobile satellite service. And so that really goes to the heart of our mission.
I began by asking you, Karim, to draw on your over 2 decades of experience in the space sector, what's happening now with Space42? How revolutionary is it in terms of your experience in this whole industry? I mean, how remarkably new is this?
Well, I'm not very good with sort of flattering ourselves. So what I would say is the following.
Indulge me.
We're the first factually out of the starting gate on this. Now, you could argue whether you have or you don't have a first mover advantage. But I think the fact that we're the first out of the starting gate affords us the privilege of starting with a blank sheet, of sort of being as creative and innovative as we need. We'll have the highest share of stumbles and challenges and few bumps along the road. But again, because we're in the UAE, because of who our shareholders are, because of the talent pool, my colleagues within the Space42 community, there's around 600 to 700 colleagues. I'm absolutely confident that this is going to be a fantastic journey, but it's going to be hard. So I don't want to sort of undermine the difficulty. Space is a foreign environment to us, is an alien environment. We need to appreciate this. It's a very demanding environment. But it's quite a privilege, right? After 20 years of wonderful experiences in the industry, it's a privilege at my point in my career to join the more talented colleagues that I have because they're of a different generation, and I'll take on that journey. If this was just another space company, I think it would be missing all the sort of the sparkles that we all expect. It is not. So what I want to emphasize is what we're doing is unprecedented. So again, I don't want to sort of say, well, we're going to be this and that, but we're first of the starting gate. That's a fact. And what we're undertaking is quite unprecedented.
I appreciate your candid insight, and I can see the sparkle in your eyes as you describe it. I think it's really important for us to underline the point about just how you are at the forefront of space tech innovation. Now, as the space sector continues to flourish in the UAE, across the Middle East, how important is the space industries as a whole to the economic development of countries?
We will only succeed if through our work and the work of other participants in the space ecosystem, we actually expand that ecosystem. It's absolutely important. Even if you bring the best talents under a single roof, you're still a single player. And that sort of benefit of cross-fertilizing, of cross-pollinating ideas, minds, and talents would be missing. Plus, if we don't have the right ecosystem around us, it means that we will continue to rely through all the required collaborations, because we'll never claim that we're coming up with all the answers on our own. It means that most of the collaborations that we are tapping into would be through entities that are based outside the UAE, and that will be a formidable missed opportunity. Now, what gives us great confidence is that the UAE space strategy, the 2030 I referred to, among the 5 pillars, one of the pillars is to create this environment that will incentivize existing and new players to come together. So that's point number 1. And by the way, the recently published AI policy talks about this. So I have the acronym in my mind, which is ACCESS, ACCESS. The second C is about collaboration. So the A stands for advancement of AI. And the second sort of principle is about collaboration. And that collaboration has to be international. So I don't want to sort of in any shape or form undermine the importance of being able to tap into the talent pool, the knowledge, the expertise, the IP of international partners. But equally important is to be able to be part of that initial sparkle that will create the local ecosystem. And at the end, you want the UAE to be the next capital of space. There are probably a handful of capital or cities around the world that you would say these are the capitals for the space industry. And I think the UAE could be that sort of the next capital or the next country for it.
I think that's a really exciting proposition, the UAE to be the capital of space technology, space advancement, and also increasing the talent pool that are working within the space industries as well. When we talk about AI-driven solutions that Space42 are at the forefront of, what can we break them down into just so that the audience are aware of exactly what you're working on here?
A good example would be what Bayanat used to do. Now, if on a sort of, it would be helpful to clarify how Bayanat and Yasat now fit under Space42. So going forward, Space42 is our identity, and there will be two businesses. Space Services, which takes what Yasat used to do, i.e. satellite communication, and Smart Solution, which takes what Bayanat used to do. And it's quite fitting because Smart Solution, in fact, is the combination of information and data that is coming from space and from terrestrial technologies, and bringing it together with AI to sort of make interpretation, analyze this data and make interpretations of it. So let's say, for example, situations like a flood or an earthquake. What space technology in space allows you to do is to acquire images, whether they are optical images or radar-based images or any other type of images of the situation on the ground. And you can get tens, hundreds, if not thousands of those images. Now, the next challenge is how do I aggregate these images and I analyze them in a very efficient manner? Maybe a human can do that, but it's going to take few days, weeks, months, if not years. So I need now an additional level of intelligence that allows me to do the analysis within a minute or within 5 minutes or within the hour, and then make an interpretation. And so I just took the images, I was able to do the analysis, and I can now go to leadership and say, these are the areas that are the most impacted. This is how the flood is unfolded. This is our first assessment of the extent of the damages. These are the routes that are the most accessible to send first aid. And so I just took one use case, which unfortunately is an environmental adverse event that has just unfolded. And the point is, you can take now the same thing and sort of deploy the same technologies when it comes to critical infrastructure. So by being able to observe my critical infrastructure, whether it's roads, gas pipelines, power lines, and what have you, from sort of aerial platforms, HAPs, or from satellites, can I now inform decision makers about, let's say in Canada, we have often this issue. There's a big snowstorm or a big tornado, and you lose power and you lose your phone. And often it happens because many of these critical infrastructure are deployed on old networks that are subject to trees falling over them. And then you have a damage, you have a cut. And it takes them physically to have to send someone there or a team to be able to determine that. Now, if you imagine that you are in a large territory, how difficult this is. And in the meantime, you have hundreds, thousands, if not millions of dwelling units that are deprived from that service. So the point that I want to make is AI allows you to do this far more efficiently by sort of bringing these cognitive capabilities and augmenting the ability to aggregate the information we're getting from space, analyzing it, and providing this information or this analysis and these sort of interpretation as quickly as we can.
And of course, when you describe those examples, and the speed is of the essence, because these are actually informing decision makers when it comes to emergency response. So I think the cases are very compelling that you make about environmental monitoring and the role of AI in terms of geospatial analytics. When you look ahead, Karim, this is all fascinating what's happening right now. Space42 and your long-term vision. When I say long-term, it's hard to think beyond, say, 5 years or 10 years because space is evolving so quickly and so is AI. But what do you project going forward?
So at the recent GITEX conference, I was asked the same question, that is to make in sort of informed forecasting of the future of space and AI over the next 3 to 5 years. And I would sort of step back and generalize my answer with the following. I think in the context of the UAE, the coming together of industry-centric space-centric technologies and AI are going to create a far greater potential now to take these businesses from a state where they are serving quite phenomenally the UAE market and regionally to becoming businesses that are serving global markets. And we've seen this in fairness in other industries in the UAE, professional services, financial services. We've seen this less in technology per se. And I think this is the era for now the UAE to sort of become that platform. And certainly the aspiration is that the UAE will become the platform for space and AI for the global market. I'll go back to my measurement of success, which is to be able now to take our capabilities and scale them at a global level. I'll be the first one to sort of concede that more than 80% of our business today is in the UAE and the region. And the opportunity before us is how do we hyperscale what we're doing. Now, this will require a sort of change in the way we think about the business we have today. So each and every capability or business line that we're pursuing today has to be able to answer the following question. Is what we're doing a one-off project, or is this a program that evolves over time? And it has to be the latter, one. Two, is what am I doing today enable me to develop differentiated capabilities? Or again, is this a one-off opportunity? Now, one-off opportunities are interesting, but what is more interesting for us is an opportunity that allows me to develop this capability and sort of scale it in the country, in the region, and globally. The third one is this opportunity, in me prosecuting this opportunity, do I have already line of sight, to go at your question, on how it's going to evolve? Often the shortfall of many of us in technology industry, and I'll be first in this, is we get very intellectually, emotionally attached into a new innovation, and we think that this is the answer, and which, by the way, is our brand logo. And the answer to this is no, it is not.
So
this is just a starting point of a journey of evolution of discovery. That's the way we see it. So it's absolutely important that we, in our sort of medium to long-term vision, and long-term in the space industry is 5 years, beyond 5 years, you should not, is always sort of apply these three lenses to the work that you do. And I think if you do that, you put yourself in a good position.
And to put yourself in a good position, it all does depend on the teams that you're recruiting, the staff that you're retaining. What do you think people listening into this conversation should take away if they wanted to work in this area? AI, Spacetech, Space42, the UAE, they wanted to make sure that they were employable. What are the kind of skills that you're looking for in the next generation?
4 traits, which, by the way, are codified in what we call the Space42 ways of working. The first one is you have to be passionate about bringing foresight to everything you do. Whether you work in human capital, whether you work in communication, whether you work on space technology, what you're doing is very hard. There is no playbook for it. So everything that we're doing, we're literally taking a pen or writing a new AI model, but we're sort of charting our own way, which I think is a formidable privilege.
So number one, passion.
Foremost at foresight. Number 2 is working in space and working in AI is not for the faint-hearted. So you have to be bold and unafraid.
Bold.
The third one is about rolling up your sleeve, because, you can talk in very passionate way about what you're doing, but at the end of the day, space is about really sort of putting your hands into sort of, figuratively speaking, the mud and sort of shaping things the way they have to be shaped. And so rolling up your sleeve is absolutely important. And last but not least, going back to one of the points I sort of addressed earlier, is because space is very hard, even with the brightest mind, we should not sort of claim that we have all the answers. So it's all about bringing the best to everything that we do, whether the best talent exists within Space42 or it's within G42 or within the partner network of G42 or the partner network of Space42. So foremost at foresight, bold and unafraid, sleeves rolled up, and bring the best to everything you do.
And bringing the best, you therefore circle back to that point that you made earlier about international collaboration, but also fostering the talent here in home countries and across the Middle East are so vital for the future. Now, to end with, Karim, I think it's clear the answer that you'll give me to my question here. An optimist or a pessimist when you look at AI in the future?
Certainly the optimist. Having said that, we should not undermine the challenges ahead of us. I will conclude by saying we've come a long way since envisaging the merger and working on how do we put the two together, but we still have a long way to go.
And there's certainly still a lot of misinformation and misconceptions when we talk about AI's application across industries. What would you say to the pessimist who's listening into this conversation?
Well, what I would say is there's a old saying in sort of the technology domain that we tend to overestimate the impact of technology, whether it's positive or negative in the short run, and underestimate it in the long run. And so I think we should sort of tone down whether it's our over expectations or our apprehensions in the short run, because we're just in the early innings of what AI and space can achieve.
And I love the notion that you end on that point about still being in the early beginnings and the future is so bright ahead of us. Karim, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the G42 On Air podcast. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and see you for the next episode of G42 On Air.